Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today for our board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Will Marie Newton, and I will be your moderator today. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself if you're not speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you have a webcam, we welcome you to turn it on so we can make this more interactive. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under Services. And now I'd like to introduce Patrice McCarthy, CABE's Executive Director and General Counsel.
Thanks so much, Will Marie, and welcome everyone. And I'm joined today in the co-pilot seat by Sheila McKay because the topic that we thought you might want to begin the discussion around is your local budget process and how the governor's proposals will impact you. Uh, for context, in case you missed the news of yesterday, the leadership of the House and Senate announced that they will be convening next Monday and Tuesday to appropriate an additional $40 million in the current year budget for the special education excess cost grant. Yes, all right. It is really feels really good to share good news. This was a priority in each of the CABE area legislative breakfasts. It was also the first issue, and in some cases, the primary issue that we talked about in our meetings with legislative leadership. So you should all feel that your voices were heard. Now, this gives you half really of what the shortfall is, but it still at least is a step in the right direction. And we're going to use this in our advocacy as the platform to have conversations about, okay, what are we going to do for fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27? Because the governor didn't propose any increase in special ed excess cost for 2020, fiscal year 2026. Obviously, those costs aren't going down. So we're in a great place for advocacy. And I would encourage you, and I know Sheila joins me in encouraging you, thank your legislators. This, in our experience, is unprecedented for them to open up the current year budget to add funds. So I'm going to, you want to add anything before we hear about impact at the local level?
I guess I would say, know your numbers. If you don't know them now, find them. If you're able to advocate with factual information, that's the best example you can give to legislators. We know that they did this. I don't know how many school board members were involved in this decision making. I did have a conversation with a state senator from West Hartford who said that they were hoping to do this in March, and now they're doing it in February, which is even better in that respect, because as you go through your process, you have some understanding earlier, 3 weeks earlier than you might have. And the fact that, again, that you have this money is great. I will tell you that there are many legislators who don't understand what excess cost reimbursement grant is. And as a refresher, I will tell you, and the example I always use is you get back after your district has expended 4.5 times the average per pupil expenditure. So if your district spends $10,000 to educate a student, you don't, you spend more. 10,000, nice round number. It's $45,000 that your district has to spend on that student before you may seek reimbursement. If that outplacement is $200,000, you'd be looking for 155. You know that 3 weeks ago when you got your disbursements, you did not get anywhere near 150. Well, again, that's for one student, but you got about 40% less. No, about, well, the tiered process now in disbursements, which is 2 years old, goes from about 61 to 92 or something like that. And there's 3 tiers. Pretty much nobody hit their tier, that's for sure. So everyone was in the 50s and 60s, I think it's fair to say. So anyway, you all received much less than you expected. Your superintendents likely based their budget number very conservatively. And they're now saying, we tried to be conservative, but man, you hit us below the belt.
Yeah.
So, know that's a message that we've heard for sure. What else?
Sorry, I know you said we get paid back, it's after,
4.5 times the average per pupil expenditure
In your district.
in your district. So you need to know what your district spends to educate a student. And then you multiply that by 4.5 times, and that's what after that, you may seek reimbursement for. There are a number of districts, many districts, that spend that much money and don't spend just up to that and don't seek reimbursement because their special ed students are in-house and not as severe. They're not outplacements. So there's a lot of special ed costs that never hit the threshold. There is talk, and Patrice can go into this more too if we want to, on changes that will be made, we hope to be made, to the special ed excess cost reimbursement. There's changes potentially on special ed within the education cost sharing formula. I don't know where you want to go on this. Do we want
Well, I think I'm going to have your conversation about your local budgets and potential impact of the governor's proposals. So let's open it up to you. And Leonard, I know that you had, I think last night, a budget meeting.
Yes, we did have a budget meeting last night, and it was very, very contentious. But for the most part, special ed was not our issue. It was more towards insurance. We had a high medical costs for our staff over the last year, and we had to add 125% to the reserve, so that equaled $2 million because we're already hemorrhaging $2 million. So that added about 2% to our budget. So it made special ed situation look very, very small. But we spend a lot on special ed here in Windsor. And seeing that it seems like it incentivizes you to spend more money and to outplace kids, we've taken a different direction. And we are actually, put my camera on. We're actually fighting and trying to bring those kids back in district and to save money so that those monies can be spent elsewhere. But we do welcome the additional funding. We hope that they consider 3 times instead of 4.5 times. And we've been heard. Patrice and Sheila has been at the Capitol. Myself and other board members on CABE have been going to all the leadership on both sides of the aisle, advocating for every single school district. We've been very clear that we're representing every small district, every large district, every district. And I think that message has been received well with everyone. I encourage you to get with your legislators and just say, hey, this is what we are, who we are, and these are challenges that we're having with our local tax authority. If you have your 30-second elevator speech and know your numbers and be able to run it off to them rather quickly, it's more effective because a lot of them do not understand the formula and why it's such a pressure on the local and why you're not getting enough from the state. So you have to slow walk them.
Yeah. And Patrice mentioned that, the number in the budget at the moment is 181 million. But we know in reimbursement sought for fiscal year 24, we're about 260 million. So 261 million, I think. So that's a huge difference in the cost. That 40 million, while it's fabulous, it's great, isn't going to do it. And I think you need to be able to show how much your costs are raised, what your, how your outplacements are working, whatever you can do without, divulging the information you can't divulge in terms of individual students. But, again, know your numbers.
Who else wants to share?
Okay, I'm just going to say that I'm happy for anything that they are doing to support special education, but we're a small district. Our per pupil cost is higher. So for us to get to 4.5 times, one outplacement can be 3% of our budget.
Yeah.
And so we often don't get much reimbursement because we don't get there. And kind of like Leonard said, we have students in-house, so we're trying to do better with our cost. But I certainly think the 4.5 is way too much, and I think it should be a fixed amount instead of a percent or a number of times your per pupil cost. Because in small districts like mine, like I said, we just had a lucky situation where we lost some outplacements. But if those outplacements were in our budget, that's 6% of our budget.
Where are you from?
Basra.
Bosworth. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there are conversations around that 3%, I'm sorry, 3 times, bringing it down from 4.5 to 3 times. There's also conversations around adding a I don't want to say multiplier.
A factor.
A factor within the ECS formula, a weighting factor. That's the word I want to use. There are already weighting factors within your ECS formula for English learners, for poverty.
That's it.
For something, no, just the two. So this wouldn't be unprecedented, and it would help your districts that don't meet the threshold.
Yeah.
Mark had his hand up.
Yes, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, well, if the legislatures, if they pass it on Monday, that would take us out of deficit for this year. I mean, it doesn't help with future years, but at least this year would be thankful because last year we had to look for an additional $3 million from the city to fund our deficit. And we didn't want to present them with another bill this year because Norwich is going to get hit with reductions in pilot and the auto property taxes. So we're going to be, I think, city of Norwich overall state funding is going to drop about $3 million.
Understood.
And we don't want to add to their burden.
Right. And we are very aware that this only takes this announcement of the 40 million helps you get through this budget year. But Leonard will be testifying on your behalf today at the Appropriations Committee public hearing. He will be one of the 264 people signed up to testify. So obviously there's a lot of interest. This is just the elementary and secondary portion of the state budget, and there are 264 people signed up. And the message in that conversation is about fiscal year 2026 and 2027.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I mean, we were actually the first city in the listening tour for the special subcommittee.
Yep.
And we showed out in force. The administrators, the board, the community, parents. So I hope that our efforts, at least the first voices they heard, got through. And I hope that we were part of that decision to fund the 40 million.
Mark, I can tell you, Miriam Khan is my representative, and she's a former Board of Ed vice president, so she understands the financing piece quite well. And she definitely was enthused by the turnout down there, which led her to believe that maybe it should be more listening tours, not only for this committee but other committees in the in the CGA, to get that live public feedback instead of everyone always migrating to Hartford. So I know she has the ear of the speaker, and obviously the speaker has the ear of the governor, I would like to believe. So there's been a lot of feedback across this state. So thank you for the turnout down there. It definitely left an impression upon her, and it left her numb. Like, wow, it's a bigger issue than people are really, really giving it credit for. So she's happy that the speaker had the foresight to create this special subcommittee.
Great. I'm glad we helped.
Thank you for that, Mark. Seth.
Yeah, so I'm a little concerned going forward, and I wonder if there's any guidance that CABE has in terms of our exposure under the new federal administration. I know that the state probably uses a good amount of tax revenue, state tax revenue, to generate and to fund some of the education dollars that our districts get. But with the potential dismantling of the education department, probably what will become some sort of diminution in the block grants coming from the federal government to the state. Um, what can we anticipate going forward, and where will it hit us most? And I assume my district is probably in pretty good shape because we get almost nothing from the state and almost nothing from the feds. So it's going to continue on, probably mostly self-funded as usual, but I have really strong concerns for my fellow boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madison's
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah. In that for once, Madison can
Yeah.
feel lucky.
Yeah.
Um, we can't predict. It's been a topic of conversation with our discussions with legislative leadership.
Mhm.
They can't predict either. What their approach right now is they're going to develop a state budget based on the current realities because
Right.
the uncertainty from DC is just chaotic. So they're going to develop that. And if they need to make adjustments, they will do that. And if they need to ask the governor to declare a state of emergency that allows them to access additional resources that are in reserves, they would do that. Um, but right now, we can only plan for the facts as we know them. There'll be litigation around these executive orders.
There'll be judges that come, judges that go.
Right. There are, even if the Department of Education is dismantled, there is the thought that those grants may not be funded at the same level, but that they would be transferred to other agencies. We all wish we had a clear answer as to what lies ahead, but I think uncertainty is the only thing that we have.
And Patrice, to build on that, that's why the CGA is also being very cautious right now as well, because they just have no idea what they may have to provide in the absence of federal funding. So everyone's anxious. Definitely Department of Education. You got the Department of Agriculture that works with the lunch programs in the states and stuff like that. So there's a lot of uncertainty that's going on right now. But as a Board of Ed member, I'm encouraging the boards to please just continue to try to fund your districts as best as possible. Continue to work with your local taxing authority, and more importantly, continue to work with your state senators and state reps that represent you in the CGA, and let them know exactly what your priorities are, not only with the Board of Ed side, but also on your town side, so that they can make an educated decision. But if the governor has to declare a state of emergency to gather those funds, we're going to be in a much worse place than anyone could have ever imagined, from a political standpoint.
Does it make sense? I know that I completely trust and am very confident that CABE will maintain its finger on the pulse of this and kind of monitor as things progress. But does it make sense to take a task force approach or something so that we already have a sub body in place to take, to recommend action as needed, or to,
You
lobby or
talking,
whatever is
you're talking
needed?
about from a K board of directors perspective?
Yeah.
All right, I'll take that under advisement, and I'll work with Patrice on that to get some feedback on that. Had not thought of that viewpoint, but I'll take it under advisement and work on it.
We already have a government relations committee that we could
Yep.
activate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what he's wanting though, we do have the committee, and I am thinking about looking at that committee, but I'm thinking about he wants this to be a laser sharp focused effort, and I just want to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
So without promising him anything, I just said I would just take a look at it and see how we can make it work.
Yeah, and
And I have no problem going through existing channels and using the government relations committee that way or whatever. I think there ought to be some kind of focus so that we're not caught on our heels.
yeah, if I can interject for a moment, from Norwich, I've had several conversations with Kathy Austin, who's the lead of the finance committee, and she says they do have contingency plans which they are working on. So they are fully aware of what's happening in Washington, and they're ready to jump on it if need be.
Yeah. I'm going to go to, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you're on your iPad, and then we'll go to Lindsay. And you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really sorry, I don't know how to put my name on the
It's
screen on
okay.
Zoom. Anyway, my name is Suzanne Sack. I'm from RSD 17. I had a couple
Great.
questions about special education, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about this national fund, risk of money not coming nationally. So first off, on the 40 million that's coming for the excess grant, the bill that was passed by the legislature, does that need governor approval?
Hasn't passed yet.
It has to pass the legislature in the House on Monday, and the Senate is going in on Tuesday. And then, yes, it needs to be signed by the governor. If he did not sign it, they would try to override his, if he vetoed it. We don't think that that is the scenario at all. That there's a commitment to get this done.
Okay. Okay, because on the news, he didn't seem all that committed, but that you never know from what the news is reporting. So secondly, for next year, as they comprise their budget, do we anticipate the same thing in terms of $260 million requested and it being funded at such a low rate of 181? Do we still
We don't
anticipate?
know what the request will be because it's a reimbursement request.
I understand that, but we
Right.
don't expect it to go down, correct?
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we have the governor's budget, which is funding it at the same level as this year.
Okay.
The goal is through the appropriations committee to get that number increased.
Okay. So we're looking at the same
That's our
scenario.
advocacy ask.
So yeah, so we're looking at the same scenario or worse for next year.
Exactly.
If reimbursement requests go up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's why your voices have already made a difference. Now we need to continue that effort in the fiscal years going forward.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, on the special education front, our Learn Resc does a fabulous job in their Ocean Avenue School of providing special education for students. However, the western side of the Learn District does not get serviced the same way, just simply because they have focused in where the greatest need is, and that's probably appropriate. But we've been asking for years for them to open something on the west side of the district to support us in the same way that the eastern side of the district is supported. And so while lobbying the legislature, I would also love CABE to check in with the RESCs, and especially Learn, to see what their plans are, because rather than sending these kids over hill and dale to all sorts of places, it would be really nice to have a centralized place like Ocean Avenue to be able to do that on the west side of our district. And we have a member, I've asked our member on the board at Learn, who's very active, to continue to support that. But I think under the circumstances, finding real longer term solutions rather than asking for more money might be a better way, or a supplemental way for us to approach this.
And the special ed task force did recommend that there be a pool of money, incentive grants, to help RESCs and or districts develop more local programs, or regional, a district could offer services to some surrounding towns. That the governor did include that in fiscal year 2027. We're again going to be pushing for that to be done sooner, not later, because the need is now. And that would help perhaps Learn, Region 17, or others in the area have the resources to develop a program. There's also monies planned for bonding funds for facilities for that purpose.
Great. Thank you. And then I just had one last question, not on special education, but on national funds. Does anybody know how much money comes from the federal government to the state of Connecticut that gets then in turn channeled out to our school boards of education?
We don't know. I don't know the dollar value. I mean, we could seek to ask that from the State Department of Ed, but the percentage on special ed set in 1974 was supposed to be 40% across the nation. And Connecticut should have received something around 16% all these years. And we are getting about 6%.
Yeah. And the big hit for Connecticut, while the education piece is significant, is if we lose our federal reimbursement for Medicaid. And then, of course, while that's not education, it impacts the entire state budget significantly.
I was listening to NPR this morning, and Comptroller Scanlon is looking to put together, or maybe it has already started, I can't recall the way the sentence went, but something along the lines of what Seth said, some sort of a chart of what funds are not coming forward from the federal government. So we'll check in with his office as well.
We're going to go to Lindsay and then Karen.
Hey, good morning, guys. I missed the first 10 minutes, so if I'm repeating, I apologize in advance. So I don't like to talk about drawbacks without talking about positives. I thought yesterday was a really good step forward, and
Yes.
I really appreciate that they publicly are understanding past the committee that this is such an issue within special ed, and I do think that's a positive. I came up with a pretty big negative yesterday. When people in our towns are watching the news and they see that, the state has decided to give us $40 million in special education funding. We're in the middle of budget discussions, and now our towns think we are getting more funding. And I want boards, as chairs, be very mindful to very much understand and communicate to your towns what you are receiving, what you could be potentially receiving. If you didn't receive the email on the breakdowns, our district is looking at $122,000, and that's it out of that 40 million. So, I think we have a lot of work to do, and I like the task force idea. And I think if anyone can figure out how to do it, Leonard and Seth can. And I'm happy to be involved. And I think the more we get them to understand that districts, even how high our sped numbers are in a rural district, like we will continue drowning even with this change. $122,000 is not going to help us dig our way out of the percentage that we're currently in, no matter how hard we try. So I think it's a positive. Just be cautious of people understanding that, because 40 million looks like a lot of money until you realize how it's all doled out. So that's all I have.
Thanks for that, Lindsay. Very good point. And we did begin with the positive of, yes, they heard you, and $40 million is helpful, and it's only for this fiscal year. So,
yeah. And the speaker started the conversation yesterday, or the press conference yesterday, by saying Hartford, 30% of their budget is special education. So when you talk about that 40 million, there's a large percentage of that going to the urbans for sure.
Karen.
Hi. So I know you were asking in where we are. So the Board of Ed had approved our budget. We are already in front of the BET defending our budget. So all of this other discussion has come after we made our presentation. And yes, we got about half of what we were expecting, and are used to getting for special education, and our just because our overall town funds have gone up just because we've had a lot of wealth move in, but our needs are still as great as ever. We haven't had a reduction in students with needs. So that's a big gap for us, but we are figuring out ways to bring our students back to our schools as opposed to outplacement. And I think that's a huge, huge piece of the puzzle, not just for funding, but for families and for the students themselves of finding ways to keep them in district and with their, like-minded peers, and their families have less stress of travel. Actually, we had hired an outside company to audit our special education program and come up with recommendations for us 3 years ago. I just finished our 3 years of implementation. They came back, and actually we're getting a presentation tonight by the same company. They've reviewed where we are with all of those recommendations. So that'll be interesting to see. But I think the two questions I have in regards to special education and funding, one is I think the state, we're talking about not just the excess cost grants, which they really do need to really look at the costs and the numbers, because the numbers are increasing, not just in Connecticut, but nationwide, and the needs are just becoming greater and greater. And the longer we push that off, the greater those needs become for those students. And we're just not doing our jobs servicing those students by making them wait. Finding more state programs that would be considered reimbursable for families, I think is also a significant need if we're going to be talking up at the state. And I've spoken to my local legislation as well. So that's there. It's also lucky that we happen to have many of the state politicians and national politicians that live in Greenwich, so we see them often enough and get to have those conversations. I'm always happy to share those details with them. But I think the other piece that we haven't been talking about when it comes to special education is preschool. That's a big discussion here. We're also getting a presentation tonight on preschool. For years we've heard about universal pre-K. We've heard about preschool being universal access to pre-K being part of the thing that will help achievement gaps shrink, which is significant. But we are getting pushback from those who are funding things here as to the need for more preschool classes, because every year those numbers go up of students that need preschool from birth to 3 that are recommended and so forth. So I'm just curious to see what other districts are doing in regards to that, how your towns are looking at universal or town-funded preschool for students with special needs, and what those ratios look like for you of students of need and traditional students in the preschool classrooms. We instituted a new preschool curriculum a year or two, 2 years ago, or a year or two. So we're looking to see results from that as well. But our numbers just grow and grow and grow in the preschool uh, preschool area. I'm curious also to see how you guys deliver preschool, if it's based on, in multiple different schools, if you have a single preschool location. I mean, I guess it depends on district size, but I'm just curious.
Who can help Karen with her question?
Hi, Barbara
Hi,
Marino.
Barbara.
Hi, I'm from New Britain, board chair in New Britain. So we have preschool broken down across a couple of different buildings currently, and it involves the regular pre-K as well as our pre-K for autistic children. We are very fortunate because, sorry, the sick grandson's in the background if you hear any coughing. So we are very fortunate within the next couple of years, we've gotten funding that we're going to be building a preschool facility as part of one of our other elementary school renovations. So we will then bring all of those preschool classrooms from across the district into one space, including, the regular and the special needs pre-K. So very excited about that. I'm a very strong proponent, mother raised 4, grandmother with 5, of pre-K education. I think it's critical. I think they're little sponges at that age, and they really, they want to learn. They want to, it's critical for their early learning to take on with them later. And so I'm very excited that we are able to build this facility and start programming and centralizing it within our town. I I was a little confused about this endowment thing discussion yesterday. And the, 30 million, we've already talked about how 40 million doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, 30 million isn't going to do much either from a preschool perspective. And I agree, Karen, it's only growing. We're seeing those numbers grow as well. So I don't know how 30 million is going to work. If somebody's got a surplus somewhere, please God, yeah. That'd be wonderful. I mean, I'm only my assumption takeaway was maybe they're assuming that investment income from whatever is sitting in the fund and not used is going to earn more than the 30 million that was sent out. But good luck with that. Whatever you're investing in, then please, I want to tag along and I want to, join in. But so I'm a little concerned, and I was a little concerned about what I sensed to be a lack of oversight with those funds. In other words, it goes over here and somebody else gets to dictate and say who gets what and where it goes. And would be a lot of planning discussion, yes, okay, but just seem to then become out of individual districts' control and input. Maybe I misunderstood that. If somebody can help me with that.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Barbara's referring to the governor's proposal around a endowment fund to help get us to universal access to preschool. I would say that there are a lot of the details that haven't been fleshed out yet, and that on the positive side, it is recognition that this is an important issue, that universal preschool is helpful for access to universal preschool is helpful to all of our students, not just those with disabilities. And so accelerating that, getting more resources available sooner would be our advocacy ask. Seth, I see you've posted in the chat, and I think you deserve to brag. So I'm going to ask you to share what you put in the chat because I'm not sure everybody has access to it.
All right. So we this year in our budget planning, we were cognizant of the fact that our town is going to be taking on a substantial amount of debt beginning this year for our school's renewal plan, where we're building a brand new pre-K to 5 school that'll be open in the fall. And we've also updated a couple of our other schools, like beautifully and functionally, to their new needs with the school's renewal. And so we came in. Oh, and the other thing is, we're very fortunate in that we are self-insured for health. And this year, our health insurance experience came in with a recommendation of only it was like 2% or something or less. So our health insurance being almost flat was very helpful, but it allowed us to come in at 2.46% operating budget increase. So we had a joint session with our Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen last Wednesday, I think it was, and that ended up with the Board of Selectmen. They only have recommendatory power in our town over the school budget, so they recommended that the budget go forward to the Board of Finance without any changes. I am friendly with some folks on the Board of Finance, and I understand it's likely to go through with little or no changes at all at Board of Finance. They're very happy with it.
It's always nice to hear some good news in challenging times. Thank you, Seth.
What districts? I'm sorry, I forgot.
It's Madison.
Madison. I know you said earlier. I forgot to mention I'm from Greenwich.
Thank you.
And Lindsay, in response to your question, Karen, in Region 13, Durham Middlefield, Lindsay's district, they have one-to-one peer model identified students for pre-K 3 and pre-K 4.
And if I may, for 1 second,
Yeah.
Patrice, we do see, I think, the district's perspective and our sped department's perspective is that we wait on including anything until the state really irons out, universal pre-K and what the really recommendations are. And I think this year and what's coming from the feds, you're going to see some back burner, I think, on universal pre-K. I think they've got a lot on their plate, and I don't expect we're going to see anything this year on it. If we do, I'd be really surprised. But for us, it's we're a small district, so even though we don't get all kids in that peer model with the one-to-one, it does give access for a lot of our general ed pre-K students that are going to be in district for kindergarten to be with some of their peers. Uh, it's not perfect, but we have a pre-K 5 building that is set to start, hopefully, construction, demo and construction this coming year. And if anyone's looking at doing construction, and I'm sure the architects will tell you, but really look at being able to build in the space if you really need it for pre-K. And, we believe we've built in the numbers based on the highest enrollment for, every student to be able to be in pre-K in that building. But I think some people will come into space issues when this comes about, even from the smaller districts all the way up to the big ones.
Thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to go to Lydia, but I want to make sure to welcome Jennifer Perez. Jennifer is a fairly new board chair, the Bridgeport Board of Education, and we're just happy to have you join this very supportive group of board chairs. Lydia.
Yes, we welcome you, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you. We are still in the process of our budget, so Tuesday night we'll be passing it. But here in Simsbury, we just had presented to our Board of Finance. We are purchasing a former building that was occupied by business right next to our high school. And we plan on converting that into our, SPED programs. So we will be providing programs in-house. As you all know, we all send our students out that in great need to other facilities and agencies. So the hopes of this, and this has been a long time coming, and providing it passes, is that we will be able to have our students return back to our district and be able to utilize the new building that's going to need a little bit of retrofitting. But this is the biggest issue that is going on right now. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. We were at Board of Finance and we explained all of this to them, and we'll be doing it again, and to the Board of Selectmen. But this is going to be a very big initiative to the town, but it is definitely a worthwhile program that we need to institute within our district.
Thanks, Lydia. And I'm just going to point out a couple of things in the chat related to budgets. Granby had a 5.67% ask, and their Board of Finance wants it down to 3.25. I'm sorry, Monica. This functions as a support group for board chairs. So sharing your pain is okay.
It hurts.
Allison in Newtown, they're self-insured and their medical insurance costs are increasing by 23%. So that is obviously a huge hit. And I think of Bethel, they have a 33% increase in health insurance. They've asked for a 9.83% budget increase, and they don't see that was not going to get approved. So they reduced it to 8.5 and hopefully they get that passed. I'm going to go to Allison now. I hope, cross fingers from Scott. CABE staff will be sending positive vibes to all of your districts. We don't vote in all of your communities, but we are thinking of you. Jennifer.
Hi, thank you for having me. So we haven't approved our budget yet, and we're still in the process of working on it. We're still looking at cuts to kind of offset any deficits that might happen next year for in this year's budget, and then we're simultaneously we're working on next year's budget. So I'm not really sure what our ask is going to be. We're still towing the line of should we make a really large ask of the city and knowing we're not going to get anything near what we ask, or just make something reasonable so that we can um, you know, have something. In terms of special ed, we're in the process of doing a facilities master plan, and a demographic study. So part of the recommendations, I believe that we're trying to put forward is bring special ed out of district placements back in as well. We have over 300 students in our out of district placements, and another part of that is actually just looking in terms of what we're doing internally to like how we're placing students, and really kind of doing a internal audit of our own special ed, who's getting placed out. Are we just sending these kids out just because we don't want to deal with them in the district, or is there a real need for them to be sent to these places, so out of district placements? So we're really looking at refining our programming itself. And so that's something that, is a work in progress, and the goal is to hopefully in the next 2 years is to open a program in Bridgeport that could offer out of district folks to come to us, and try to like uh, get some reimbursements there and stuff. So that's like kind of a long-term plan. This year we're just I guess trying to just stay afloat. But like really looking at the internal systems on what we're doing now that can help us with some of these costs. And so yeah.
Let me
Thanks so much for sharing, Jennifer.
let me jump in before we keep going here. I wanted to let you know that the Appropriations Committee will be having the State Department of Ed present at 1 o'clock today. So if you wanted a flavor for how legislators were thinking about the budget going forward, specific to education, tune into the Appropriations Committee's YouTube page at 1 o'clock for SDE's presentations.
Because the department will both present, but then they will have questions from the legislators. Suzanne.
Technology is a challenge for me. Sorry about that. Okay. Insurance. So I've heard a lot of people saying that their insurance is out of control, and I would say 23% and so on is definitely out of control. One of the things I would ask CABE to consider in terms of working with also the superintendent coalition body, which CAPS or whatever escapes me at this point, is helping superintendents understand insurance. So I don't know how Madison can have a self-insured plan and only come in to 2 to 3% and somebody else have a 33%, except for the nature of the way the plans are designed, the co-shares of the employees, and the claim experience. And maybe there's very special milk in Madison that they're drinking that's keeping everybody very healthy, but it's uncanny. But I think that superintendents don't understand all the tools available associated with insurance that allow them, and obviously have to be, bargained with units, but so that they understand how claims impact their insurance, how the design of the plan, that co-shares, everything. There's all these different levers that are going into the puzzle, and how do they manage them effectively on behalf of the Board of Education.
I will certainly share that thought with my counterpart, Fran Rabinowitz at CAPS. Thanks for that, Suzanne.
Yeah, and I would add possibly the business officials. Each year, school districts' business officials may have a better understanding of the insurance. So how that gets imparted to the superintendent, I don't know, but ultimately it's the responsibility of a school business official to understand that.
I would echo
Can I
what
just add,
Suzanne
we
said
also,
as well.
I'm sorry,
Our superintendent essentially had to become an expert on insurance in the last few months to deal with
Yeah.
the spike that we're experiencing. And I think it's also a challenge that the rates for the state plan aren't published until March. And so we don't know those when we're building our budgets. And so it's, we get a lot of pushback from folks in town. Why don't you just go to the state plan? It's like, well, that might be even better. We don't know yet.
Right.
So that
Well,
the timing is the difficulty.
On the self-insured plan, we also don't get our experience rating until March. So but what we do, and Suzanne, this goes to your point, which is a great point. We're fortunate that we have a good HR person, but we also have selected a third-party administrator that also provides consultative um, attention. Not they don't just administer the plan, they give us a lot of advice in that regard. And so we've been very proactive about trying to be more competitive in our pay structure for teachers and staff, but at the same time, extracting some concessions back in terms of having them go to like group orthopedics plans and stuff like and higher co-pays and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Seth. Leonard.
Thank you. So I'm going to say everything that Seth said. On top of that, Windsor over the past 12 years has had a very flat experience with our claims. This is the first year where we've had about 6 to 7 staff members all at once really experience some very difficult conditions that really maxed out our plans. So it's been a I don't want to use the word tragic, but it's been a difficult year for some staff members, and that really just blew our plan out of the water. And on top of that, we our plan is self-insured with the town, and they've also experienced very high claim rates this year. So it's very abnormal in Windsor to have this type of experience, and it's something that everyone's grappling with and we're trying to figure out how we get through the next 2 to 3 years with the understanding of some of the cases that we're dealing with right now. It's some are short term, and a few of them are long term. So, but we're going to take care of our employees, and I believe all of us on this call believe we should take care of our employees. It's the moral thing to do, and we just got to figure out the financing.
Now, the other thing that I should point out, though, we did take our lumps and bruises over the past couple years. I think what we found, and this is self-funded plans are subjected to this, over the last couple of years with the bounce back from COVID, a lot of people who had put off elective surgeries and that sort of thing went to get them in the couple years after COVID. So we had a couple high experience years that seems to have settled down. Now, I will say the advantage then of a self-funded plan is once that settles down, our experience comes back down and we can budget accordingly. Whereas, once insurance goes up 20%, they're never coming down. They're not giving you a discount the next year. So
And Jody Goler, who is our policy expert and also a former superintendent, suggests that you go out to bid every 3 years for your insurance agent of record and your health plans so that you keep testing the market.
I just wanted to add, I made a point of saying that the Hartford board has about 30% of their budget for special ed. And I said that, that how far that 40 million might go, but they also, as an urban, have probably a heck of a lot of students that are under the threshold too. So I don't know where that money will work out.
Other comments or questions? I do refer you to the chat because there's a lot of information that your colleagues have shared there in terms of where they are in the budget process. I've just tried to pull out a couple of them that I highlighted for you, but there's definitely additional information there. Other comments, questions? We hope that we're going to see all of you at CABE's Day on the Hill on March 12th. It's a wonderful opportunity to advocate as a group. Sheila Leonard's going to be there. And Lydia's going to be there. Your staff will be there. It's a wonderful opportunity to have a show of force, to learn from some legislative leaders, and then to make appointments with your own legislators, even if you only have a 10-minute chat with them in the hallway. If they know you're coming, they will make an effort to have time to see you. And it's a Wednesday in the middle of the session, so there's a high likelihood that most legislators will be in the building.
And I would add that Sheila's doing a webinar on March 4th, helping you prepare for Day on the Hill. So an overview of the issues and how to best advocate when you do have these appointments, and then the issues will be gone into in greater depth at the Day on the Hill session. So if you haven't already, make a plan to register for that as well.
Thanks for that, Lisa.
Can you put the information in the chat to register for that, just in case we can't find it in our very full inboxes?
Will Marie, are you able to do that?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
The Education Committee is going to have a public hearing on the 26th, which is next Wednesday. The bills were released today. There is a bill that is an act concerning school choice. It is 8 lines. Asks the commissioner to develop a program for the expansion of school choice in the state. So it's the legislature pushing this pushing this responsibility off to the commissioner. To develop such programs, commission may hold hearings, accept public comments concerning expansions of school choice. This is the voucher bill. This is going to be a lot of people testifying on behalf of creating a voucher. There is a bill in here for your districts to create policy on library and how your books are reviewed, if they need to be reviewed, and what is a qualified complaint. There is school breakfast in here. There is an act excluding absences from student observance for religious holidays, which would allow each student 1 day. And have that not count towards truancy. Let's see. Posting your curriculum online. Pilot program on certain at-risk youth. Defibrillators. The gamut.
It's going to be another busy day next Wednesday at the legislature. I see that Will Murray has put the Day on the Hill registration link in the chat. And I think I saw Lindsay's hand up.
Yeah, I put it down real quick. I just want to say CABE on the Hill was amazing last year. If anyone hasn't been, or you have board members, if you can't go and you have board members that want to go, but are just hesitant because we're all busy and they don't know what it's all about, and you want to travel together and meet up there, I'm always happy to do that. It's worth going. It's great. And we all get to see each other more than just on a screen. So it helps too. So.
The only thing that's missing is we won't be able to do the march from the Bushnell. It saves us some money, but that traditional march from the Bushnell all the way to the Capitol is something I'm going to miss. So we're going to have to really figure out a 450-foot march from the Armory to the LOB building to make it effective.
We're going to march around that park there right outside of the LOB. Don't worry. I have to have my bullhorn opportunity.
Maybe we can get them to set off the cannons like they do when the governor.
I don't think we should try for that.
Hey, Seth, you and I can pull that off.
I tell you, if anyone can pull it off, they can.
All right. On behalf of the CABE Board of Directors and staff, we wish you a successful budget season, and we will be thinking of you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.